Sitting here in Karachi, where your journey, I suppose, started as a schoolgirl, back then, what were your dreams and how do they compare to the reality today?
Well, James, thank you so much for having me. And first of all, thank you to everybody who's come, because I know evenings are quite precious on a Saturday. So I'm going to try and deliver something interesting, I hope. But you're more than happy to leave if I am very nervous, as you can imagine. This is my day job, but I've never really spoken about this journey. So coming back to your question, my journey did start in Karachi, but I've been to over 8 schools all over Pakistan. So I would say I'm a product of the best and worst. And in all those different schools, whether it was a convent in Quetta where I was beaten up by tribal girls, or whether it was Lahore, a Sacred Heart, where I was made to knit and write beautifully, or whether it was Karachi Grammar School, where I spent the longest time, and I was told that girls could play sport and they could go abroad. It's been a very interesting journey. I always knew I had to fly. That's all I need to know, and I ended up where I did.
There's just so much to talk about. Of course, World Bank judge, we're going to talk in depth about that. But is that something that you knew as a schoolgirl, a legal profession? Is that what you wanted to be? I mean, I know I don't want to be stereotypical, but when you talk to people about dreams, they want to be an actor or a sports star. Did you want to be in the legal profession?
No, I wanted to be a writer, actually. When I was little, I won an essay competition. I was 12 years old, and it was the SARC gold medal for essays writing. And I had filled in a form in a newspaper and put in a story thinking I'll get a pencil case or something, and then I ended up winning the gold. And I ended up going to India to get the prize from the Prime Minister. It was quite an interesting conversation of a 13-year-old Pakistani with an Indian Prime Minister when the countries were about to go to war. It taught me about international diplomacy, above all, and it made me want to write more. But also there was a part of me that wanted to create impact. Literature creates impact, but law creates impact directly. And for me, I had a choice to study literature or law as a 17-year-old at Cambridge, and I opted to do law. I was told I was going to be a very bad lawyer by my director of studies, and I should really give up. And then I ended up winning Trainee Lawyer of the Year, and I became England's best lawyer for a while.
So it's a
very strange life.
I was going to say, great thing you didn't give up, but how does that start? How does one go from Karachi in Pakistan to Cambridge University? What happens? How do you make that happen?
So James, I'm going to tell you something. So I should say,
this is a secret.
I am now a fellow at Cambridge as well. I'm a fellow at, I guess what you call a professor here. It's one of my side hustles.
We're seeing some pictures of a very young you on the screen, by the way.
It's very embarrassing.
We thought we would embarrass you.
Why not? We can pause it. But it's been a very interesting journey, because Cambridge, everyone talks about Oxford. Not many people go to Cambridge, I guess. It's not really one of the things. I wanted to go to Oxford or Cambridge because I felt that a lot of the leaders, whether it was Jinnah, well, not Jinnah didn't go to Oxford, but Nehru, a lot of very famous people who had changed history had gone to Oxbridge, and I really wanted to kind of get the best I could get. But I actually sent my CV with a letter as a 16-year-old to all the directors of studies and said, would you like to meet me? It was the bravest thing I think I've ever done. And I think they were so fascinated by this child from Karachi writing to them with a CV saying, would you like to, can I meet you for a coffee? And I met them, and they said, you should apply.
It's a bit what I started off saying, that it's great to dream, but you also have to have the courage to pursue that dream. And that's exactly what you did. You have to persevere as well, don't you?
I think when you have, I don't want to sort of oversell it, but if you ask me now, would I do anything like that? Ever? No. And I think one thing that age and experience robs of you is that ability to dream, the optimism you have. You want to make things happen, and as you get older, you get jaded now. Imagine me writing a letter saying, I'd wonder whether that person even wants to have coffee with me. It'd be so embarrassing. I'll think 3 times. But that little girl, I went back to Cambridge to find that young woman who had credibility, who had the courage to say, you know what, what's the worst that can happen? They just won't answer. And frankly, I didn't have much to lose.
And we are going to talk about the World Bank and the legal profession, so it might get a little bit complex, but there's a lot that we want to talk about. And I want to ask about anecdotes as well, because here's a young girl who moves from Pakistan to Cambridge. Was it a culture shock?
It was a huge culture shock. I mean, the first thing I noticed was that, I mean, I did law, and my first course was international law, and I was obviously taught by the guy who'd written all the constitutions of the world. And obviously, we were just a former colony, as you can imagine, and you can probably relate to that somewhat, James, given your origins from Gibraltar. And they, you know, the map was different. So I saw Pakistan's map, and I noticed that it looked different from what I had read, and I took a pencil and I kind of added some territory. And he said, why have you done that? And I said, well, you know, my position is that this part belongs to Pakistan. He said, you need to study international law, dear girl. And that is when I realized that what I had learned in Pakistan was quite limiting for me if I wanted to really be in an international arena. And I had to learn the laws of England and Wales, not the laws of Pakistan, and I had to learn international law. So that was a huge transformation. I did English legal history, I learned it backwards, I took Latin, I did Roman law, things I was never taught in Pakistan. So I had to reinvent myself.
I want to talk to you about your career journey and your work as a barrister. By the way, Mahnaz and I have just met like an hour ago. We've exchanged a few texts over the last few weeks when we were told that we'd be together in this session, but we've just met. So I hope she doesn't panic if she thinks I'm going to put her on the spot here. But when they gave me this session to conduct and they told me, would you like to interview a judge from the World Bank? I thought, she's going to be 95 years old and she's going to be stuffy. And you are the complete opposite. Is that a misconception about judges of the World Bank?
Well, my predecessor was well into his 90s.
I knew it.
He was a member of my chambers, interestingly, Professor Yves Fortier, a very famous chap. And look, the composition was very much what you're suggesting, you know, not properly to that wonderfully advanced age.
Not the stuffiness.
But, you know, judges tend to have great longevity, I've realized. I was very different. And I remember someone, you know, had read about the fact that I used to play polo, and they said, you better give it up now. It's not the kind of thing we expect judges to do. So I've had to deal with a lot of, like, what is a judge not meant to do? And I guess for me, the biggest thing has been trying to balance that with who I am. And over the years, you can imagine, I've been doing this for quite some time. I remember when I first took my first judicial appointment, it was for the ICSID Annulment Committee, which is the highest court within, you know, the World Bank. I was told by a very good well-wisher, he said, dear girl, judicial gravitas. And I was like, what the hell is judicial gravitas? And I started Googling it. And I tried, he said, judicial gravitas. I obviously don't have it, but I'm really working on it. So I don't know if that's the answer to your question.
I think you probably have it now. Let's just talk about two things, because when we talk about being a judge for the World Bank, that's not the day job, right? You are a barrister by profession. Is that your day job? And how does the World Bank work? They call you in when there's a case? Just explain to us how it works.
So I have, God, this is amazing. People can hear me probably. I think the crowd's been very patient. And you've obviously missed out everything I've said, so this is great. So the day job is all three. The day job is being a barrister at 20 Essex, where we represent, I represent at least mainly sovereign states in high-value disputes. So things like power projects going wrong or everywhere. I represent Turkey, Hungary, many countries. And that's what I do. So where I work as an advocate. Then I sit as an arbitrator on a lot of high-value, again, investor-state disputes. And that's also part of the job. And then I sit on, as a judge, one of 7 judges at the World Bank sanctions panel. So that would occupy a large chunk of my time, not all my time. And we are 7, but we sit as 3s on cases. And now I've just been appointed on the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank in Beijing, their sanctions panel, so that's going to be part of the day job as well. And obviously I'm a fellow at Cambridge, so
you mentioned some of the countries that you work with, and you mediate, I suppose, in disputes which are worth hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds?
No, we're talking millions and billions.
We're talking millions of
billions,
pounds.
yeah.
What's the responsibility like? I mean, are you aware when you sit there to review documents, investigations, points of law, you must be aware of the huge responsibility, do I want to say burden on your shoulders?
It's actually a huge responsibility, especially when you're representing a country that's not your own. So I'll give you an example for Turkey. When I took on the case, I was leading a team and I was not Turkish. And it was a very important case for the government, and I was told by the presidency that you are Turkish today. Okay, and I said, all right. And they fed me enough baklava, enough tea. I gained 8 kilos on that case, which I'm desperately trying to lose. And my biggest thing was I didn't want to let the people that had trusted me. So I worked so hard for that case. Also because I did want to return to Turkey and have more baklava, and I had friends by then. So I won that case, and the same goes with every case I take, especially for governments. It's a huge thing for government officials to say, I'm going to appoint you, because winning and losing is far more complex than choosing the right lawyer. But ultimately, you are the champion that's going into battle. And for some people, think feeding you is the way forward. Hungarians are now feeding me lots of cake. So let's see how that goes.
Oh, it's a bit like I'm actually based in Karachi and everybody wants to feed me, so I think I get a little bit of that. But you mentioned an interesting word there, complex. Are we as citizens generally from outside the World Bank, those of us who are not in the legal profession, is there a misconception generally about how international law works?
Well, at the moment, international law is very complicated, given world events. Yes, I think I see a very different side of international law. I see the rule of law being tested, tried, whether it's the ICJ, whether it's at the World Bank. We have a system in which international law rights are enforced. And believe it or not, it is a system that's in play. A lot of people don't know about it because it's very small. I'll give you an example. I mean, international law is actually a very small world, and there are very few international jurists around. I mean, several of the ICJ court judges were members of my chambers, for example. It shows you how small it is.
And when you sit as a World Bank judge, I'm just trying to understand a little bit about the complexity and the dynamic of it. How do you decide? I suppose you rule purely on international law and on points of law. To what degree does your understanding of the world, your own biases, your own cultural background, do those come into play at all?
I'm very conscious of conscious and unconscious bias. I think it's very important to, in a sense, when I sit as an arbitrator or as a judge, I'm very conscious of biases coming in, and I see that happening. So obviously I'm human, I see things in the context, I know how the world works. My father was a civil servant in Pakistan in the 1990s. I know the rules of business backwards. So it's not that I'm not new. I grew up, I was crawling in government offices, and that's what I do for a living. I see how governments behave. And I think, I can't say I don't know about these things, but when I'm sitting as a judge, I'm very much looking at the facts that have been presented before me, and I will apply the law as it's been pleaded and as I know it. Now that's your textbook answer.
But it's a great answer. And I do want to ask you because...
I hope that's judicial gravitas there.
Because you did become the youngest woman ever appointed to a World Bank ICSID annulment committee. What did that, on a personal level, what did that mean to you?
Well, I was shocked that I was the youngest woman, first of all. So when the news came out, now ICSID, ICSID, is basically the fifth arm of the World Bank, which no one knows about. It is the court that decides investor-state disputes. I mean, for those of us, I guess, in the room, they would know about the Reko mine, for example. There was a $6 billion claim against Pakistan over that mine, and that went to the ICSID World Bank arbitration panel. So those are the kind of disputes that you're talking about. And when I was sitting on an annulment committee, the first time I sat on it, I mean, news broke out because, it came in the newspaper that I was the youngest. And I told somebody from my chambers, I said, how do they A, know my age? B, I mean, it can't be, because I wasn't that young. I wasn't like in my 20s or 30s. So the biggest shock for me was since 1965, there were very few women appointed. In fact, there were 12 women appointed. Whether they were white, brown, doesn't matter. There were just very few women appointed. And when I looked at the number of women, and then the journalist very kindly showed me the ages, I was just shocked that there were such few women. That was my biggest thing. And I guess, yes, it's kind of strange. I hope someone will beat that sort of record soon, is all I can say.
It's not every day that we get to hear from a judge of the World Bank. You guys are not up for giving a lot of interviews, are you?
No, I don't do interviews, and I should say that I'm not speaking for the World Bank. I'm not speaking in my capacity as holding any office in the World Bank. I'm really speaking here as a human being who wears all these various hats, and I'm coming home, and I get to chat about, how I got here.
How does it feel to be home? I think some members of your family, I think your mum is in the
Yeah, my
audience,
mother's
which is
here, my
great.
aunts
Great
are
to see
here.
you.
The whole room is full of people I know. It feels very strange. It feels very odd. I've never really done it here. I've done it everywhere in the world, but here, so it's great.
Because you've lived in London for how long?
God, I've been here since I was 17, so like over 30 years.
So do you feel more of a Londoner now, or are you still Pakistani? Are you British Pakistani? I mean, which one has the pull?
I always
Are you going to give me a diplomatic answer as well?
No, I'm going to give you a very good answer. I've been asked this many times because I'm a dual national, and when you have conflicts of interest, people challenge you when you sit on various panels, and people ask me, yes, but you're Pakistani and British, but where do you sit? And I said, well, the easiest way to answer that is where do I pay my taxes? But no, I'm being facetious. There's a better answer. I always say my head is English, my heart is Pakistani. And my heart is Pakistani because I love the poetry. And that's what moves me.
Yes. Feel free to please give her a round of applause, well deserved.
But we are in Pakistan. I mean.
Also, Mahnaz Malik, the writer, we have to talk about that because you've published children's books, which I also find fascinating because it's not perhaps what I would expect from a legal brain. And I don't know why, but I would not have thought that a legal brain wants to write children's books. So how did the writing come about?
So, James, when I was young and I was a student at Cambridge, I continued writing despite being law. In fact, I did everything but law. I didn't want to do law. I just thought I'd get a third or something like, everyone does and get on in the world. And I, went for varsity. I wrote. I won the BBC competition at the time, which was amazing. I can't even ever dream of winning that again. I was 19 years old. And I thought I would maybe give up law and become a writer. And then I got an agent, and the agent said, okay, you're going to write a novel. I was 21 years old. And I said, of course I'm going to write a novel. And I said, okay, so I'm going to delay my placement in the city by 6 months, and I'll write this novel. I mean, I was a complete fool. Of course I couldn't finish the novel. I didn't even know what the hell I was doing. I was a short story writer at best. And I couldn't deliver the novel. And I had to start work as a lawyer. And then I thought, okay, I'll just finish my training, whatever, and then I'll go back to writing this book I've been dreaming of. And, my plan got scuppered because I ended up winning this like Lawyer of the Year in the UK. So my law firm said, you can't now leave the law firm because you've just won this big award, and you can't do that. And so I got really frustrated, and I ended up scribbling a story that was 1 page long. And my agent used to write to me on my birthday and say, when is the novel coming along? You're not getting any younger. Because I was picked up as a young writer. And I sent her this story as a joke. And it was literally written during a conference. And I said, this is the only thing I have time to write. And it was meant as a joke. And she never responded to me. So I thought she was very angry with me, because it was rather naughty of me to do that. And a few weeks later, somebody from the children's department got in touch and said, would you like to publish this as a children's story? And I said, okay, fine, then we'll do it. I had no idea what the hell I was doing, what children's stories were, how they worked. Apparently, I got into this whole world of children's books, which I never even knew existed. And what happened as a consequence was I realized how little writers were paid compared to lawyers. And that was the biggest shock. When they told me these were my royalties, I was like, I don't want them, give them to charity. I mean, literally, it was that bad. And so really, I decided to donate them to charity. And my illustrator said, why are you doing this? And I said, look, I have a day job. And this is, I think it'd be quite nice every time a child reads a book, another can go to Pakistan, school in Pakistan. There was a big crisis. And I like the idea that it could be a self-sustainable venture. Like, frankly, it's a children's book. I mean, I'm not going to say it's the best book in the world.
I want to talk to you about the charity, but is this the book? Are we talking about Mo
Mo
Star?
Star. So this is Mo Star, which came about literally as I told you. And I thought, okay, I'll give it to charity because Pakistan needed schools at the time. And I liked the idea of a product that generated, money for children to go to school. And my illustrator said, you know what, I'll do the same. And then OUP at the time very graciously said, you know what, we'll do the same. So we ended up sending thousands of children to school. And then I forgot about it for a while.
That's an amazing story. We are going to pick up more on that because I do want to let you know, and you might have noticed there's a table over there with Mo Stars, with copy of Mo Stars. So is this a bit of a surprise here? Because you wrote this book, how long has it been just republished then?
So I wrote it 25 years ago. Okay, and then I was very naughty. I promoted it for a couple of years, and then I became a lawyer. I didn't have to, I was becoming a barrister. I was doing more high-profile cases. And then I realized that every time I would go into court, people would tease me about the penguin, and I said, no more penguin. It's about a penguin. And I said, no more children's books. And I kind of, we took a decision in a sense for it not to be reprinted for a while. It's been translated into Arabic as well. The Arabic version is selling really, really well. And so after, I reached a stage in my life where I thought I could let the penguin out of the closet. And we basically decided after 25 years to relaunch it. Today, we have very few copies available as a special edition. It will be relaunched properly, I think, in the coming months. And I felt incredibly guilty about not giving back as much as I should have, perhaps, in these last 15-odd years. And so this is a bit, I'm here, and I'm here to really sort of try and promote the book and see if we can send some more children to school.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to sell some copies today, and we'll be able to help you give back. Will you sign copies today? Are you around to sign any copies?
I'm very happy to do anything it takes to sell a copy.
Okay, let's talk a bit about the book, The Penguin. What's the story, in a nutshell, without spoiling it?
It's not really about, you could say it's about a penguin in Antarctica that falls in love with a star, but it's really about loneliness, and it's about dreaming of flight, of going somewhere, and it's about an impossible dream, and the question is, how do you achieve it? Penguins can't fly, so...
And how has your own experiences, if at all, influenced? You mentioned loneliness there, and I was talking earlier about perhaps some anecdotes and the culture shock of moving from Pakistan to Cambridge. Was there loneliness at the time, or did you adapt well? Trying to see where the ideas come from.
I think I was very cold in Cambridge. Of course, it is very cold in Cambridge. You have Siberian winds.
And wet, by the way.
And wet. And I think loneliness is not so much, I made friends very quickly. I was very close to my family, so I was away. But I think it was really about aspiration and about achieving. I'm very fascinated by achieving something that is impossible. And sometimes I think you can achieve the impossible. I'll give you a very flippant example. I once played polo against the British military ladies team, and I cannot hit a ball for toffee. And I actually won the match because the ball was literally in front of me, and all I had to do was tap it in. And that was an impossible dream. I can say now I've beaten them. Look at me and look at them. They're Amazons. So sometimes some impossible things can happen, and for me it fascinated me. And I really wanted to get that message across. And you'll have to read the book to find out what happens. as to how the penguin gets to the stars.
I was going to say, I'm fascinated by the fact that you find time to play sport with your fantastic career in writing, but that's an aside, because I want to talk to you about Mo Star, which has also been translated into Urdu by a... Are they just going to put the microphone?
Thank you.
Because we don't want to miss a single word of this interesting conversation. The book has also been translated into Urdu by a very well-known poet.
Yes, and I would say if there's one book you should buy the Urdu one, because I haven't written it. It's been translated by one of the few poetesses in Pakistan, Fahmida Riaz. If you haven't read her work, please read her work. She is absolutely brilliant. And I was very lucky, she's no more sadly, but I was so lucky to have her translated. And when she translated it, the story just came to life. I can't tell you, and I realized that maybe at some point my heart was writing it in Urdu all along, but I didn't have the vocabulary to express it. So she is a very important part of this. I was very lucky to have her translated. I'm surprised she even bothered to do it. She had better poetry to write, but she did it, and I would really urge you to buy that.
And what's so special about the Urdu version? Because I suppose, I know you're saying, is it more poetic because she's written it? Because the storyline is the same, isn't it?
Yes, but writing is part story and part words, and it's the cadence of the words, it's the choice of the words, it's the playfulness of the words. You just can't use English in the same way as you can use Urdu. So it's very, very hard to explain. But I think the English is a bit more rigid, whereas the Urdu and the Arabic, I believe, are more playful.
And there are audio versions of the book as well.
Yes, one's by Joseph Fiennes.
Is
if you like his voice.
Is that one that's played on BBC World Service? Because I think some of your work has also been on the World Service.
No, that's not the one on the BBC. This one is, I think, available somewhere, I'm sure. And I think the Urdu version was done by a very famous Indian actress called Vidya Balan, who actually came to Pakistan for the launch in 2004 very sweetly and did the Urdu version.
I asked you earlier whether, where your heart, you spoke about your heart being here, but your life being in London. Do you feel more, how do you describe yourself? Are you a lawyer or are you a writer? I know you're both, but how do you describe yourself?
No, I'm very much a barrister and an arbitrator or a judge. I think as a writer, I can't really claim to be a writer. I've written a few books when I was young. I wrote 2 collections of short stories as a teenager, and I wrote Mo Star. So I don't think that makes me an author. I think writers are very brave people. It's a very challenging task to be a writer. I'm too much of a coward to call myself a writer, I'm afraid. I'm going to have to work much harder to earn that accolade.
It's interesting, because I've interviewed a few writers at some other literature festivals, and one word that they've sometimes used to describe their work is loneliness, because it can be a lonely process and you have to be extremely disciplined to sit and write, especially in a world when we have so many distractions around us.
I think it's, for me, yes, but as a barrister as well, you're a bit of a lone wolf, right? You don't really, you go from case to case. And I would say the same as when you're sitting as an arbitrator. You do it in panels, but it's very much the individual. When I do a case, it's my name. It's not a law firm. It's me that's responsible. So there is a loneliness in that. But I think with writing, you actually share the most wonderful part of yourself to the world. And you're never ever happy with it. People are never happy with it. You don't make any money, yet you do it anyway. And it defies all sense. And I think that's what makes it so beautiful. It's almost magical. And therefore, as I said, I don't stake a claim to it. I would have to work very hard to do that.
We're going to talk about her charity work. I hope you're finding this conversation as fascinating as I am. We're going to give you a chance to ask questions in a bit, but very, very important to talk about the charity work, because you founded charitable projects that freed more than 300 children from detention in Pakistan. You alluded to that earlier, and have helped send hundreds more to school. Why has that been so important to you?
When I was a student and I was growing up in Pakistan, I used to see things around me. And I think from a very early age, I felt I needed to do something about it. I often wrote about the themes I saw. I was a sensitive child, I guess, so I did see this. I used to play a lot of sport, believe it or not. So on the streets, I had a lot of interaction with people from different social backgrounds. There was a time when I was very little and I used to play marbles on the street and I thought I was poor and I started hating the rich. It was very, very complicated for me, I think, just growing up in seeing these contrasts, and I didn't know what to make of it. I'm sure other children go through it, maybe others don't. It left an impact. So when I read law at Cambridge, I was very mindful that this was a tool that I could use to make people's lives better. It was actually more of a responsibility, and I dare say a burden. I had the finest education. I felt I had to do something about it. My family's had a generation of, generations of public service, and I hadn't joined the government. I had no plans to join the government, and I felt, what can I do? And so I sat down literally in my head. I mean, these things happen. When I look back at the 20-something-year-old, I wouldn't take her seriously today. I mean, if someone came to me and said, I want to set up a scheme to free children in detention in Pakistan just after 9/11, to the Law Society and the Bar Standards Board, the Home Office in Sindh, the Home Office in Punjab, to the Prime Minister's office in the UK, I would just think, kid, you haven't even finished, your legal education, go home. But what was very kind was that people actually gave me a chance to make that impossible sounding dream true. And what we did was we got to the heart of it. We tried to find out, why were there so many children in detention in Pakistan? 90% of them were pre-trial. And so the question was, why were they there? And we solved the problem. So it was a very much a legal mind. Here's the problem, how do you fix it without the emotion? And that's what we did.
And you've helped hundreds of children through your charity work. Can I ask you, is there perhaps one story that has touched you more than any of the others? Is there one story that touched you in a different way?
I realized that when you talk about injustice, sometimes it's not intentional, it's accidental. And often children are not seen. And they become the system's, I guess, accidents. So there were lots of children, as I mentioned, in detention. And what we were interested in is, why are they there? And we realized that nobody wanted children to be in detention, for God's sake. Why would you want a 14-year-old to be in jail? But, one of the stories was actually quite sad. It was a 9th child of a laborer. And you can see how dated this is. This is around 2004, when kite flying was an offense in Punjab. And he had literally flown the kite. And the policeman had caught him, thinking if he caught him, he would get some money. But sadly, the laborer didn't have money to pay off the policeman. And the child was forgotten. Lawyers would charge too much money. In fact, I realized that lawyers charge poor clients more money than they charge sometimes rich clients because they feel they can get away with it. So I saw all these very strange things happening in this system. And this child ended up in detention because people had forgotten about him. The father was too helpless. The policeman had forgotten about it. There's no system of legal aid. So what this child needed was someone to get him out, someone to see him. And that's what we did. We got a lawyer to go and see him, to interview him, to fight his case, to pay and convince the judge the bail money if there was any needed, and to get him out. It was that simple. He just needed to be seen. He just needed to be represented. And he was out within a month.
I'm so glad that you're sharing your stories with us. I know that you say that you don't give a lot of interviews, but it's so great that you're talking to us here at KLF. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I think it was the Financial Times that named you Legal Innovator of the Year at just 26. You were 26 at the time, weren't you, for this work?
Yes.
The charity work. But what was the innovation? We hear of so many charity projects. What was the innovation here? What was different?
The system was the sustainability. So all my charitable projects were, in a sense, sustainable. So if it was schools, the book sold. And at the time, we had Unilever as our partner, so we sold the book like noodles. I mean, it sold a lot, actually. We went to schools, people picked it up. We sold a lot of books. And the charity just was funded from the sale. So we didn't have to go out and ask people for money. And there was a massive multiplier effect in the UK because, we were trusting the various schools, and there were more direct donations. So the innovation was the circularity. With the detention in children's scheme, and I'm really boring people who are not interested in access to justice, but again, it was a very simple solution. You don't give people handouts. You try and create a mechanism where self-interest aligns with greater interests. So I needed Pakistani lawyers who were criminal lawyers, who weren't very well off themselves, to go and free these children, represent them. What would incentivize them to do this? We didn't want to pay them. So we gave them training by British lawyers. So that was something that they got on our panel. And we gave them money for photocopying and fuel, so they could become local heroes. So there was this, we had like 700 people wanting to join our panel. We were like turning people away. And it became kind of this thing that they wanted to be associated, and they knew that they had to do a good job. So it was self-sustainable for the time we were there. It just worked.
Do you ever wonder what those children went on to do? I mean, are you in touch with any, or do you sometimes think about it? Like, what are they doing now?
Now, James, this is going to be very embarrassing. So when I did this project, I tried not to meet anyone who would come and say thank you. I wanted to be very dispassionate about this. This was very much, I have a tussle with my head and heart sometimes. I try and think with my heart. When I think with my heart, I am more logical. I come up with solutions. If I get swayed by emotion, then I get confused. This is my failing, perhaps. So I set up the scheme, and every time someone would come and say thank you to me, I would meet them and I would run away as quickly as possible. Because it would be too much for me to see them. I read the stories, I saw them from a distance, but I couldn't face those children. That's my feeling.
About the people that you meet on your career, your journey, your legal life, Cherie Blair, wife of former Prime Minister, the UK, Tony Blair, she had some great things to say about you and your future as a young lawyer.
Yeah, so Cherie and I have known each other for a very long time. It's now been a relationship of over, I would say, 21, 22 years. And it's very strange because when I met her, she was the Prime Minister's wife. And everyone told me that she charges £30,000 to attend an event. And she was a barrister at the time, so I wrote to her and said, I'm doing this book and I'm doing this scheme, would you like to come? And she said yes, and she didn't charge me any money. And I think the only reason I was in the Times was when someone called me up and said, how much are you paying her? And I said, I'm paying her nothing. And then the title was, Talk Comes Free for Cherie's Legal Friends. I was not her friend, I was just some random person. But we ended up getting to know each other, and she was very supportive of all my projects. We happened to work. We did quite a few cases together, there was a very interesting instance. Probably I'm speaking under, well, this is being recorded, so I don't know if I can speak about it or not. But it was a very complicated thing where I was sitting on a tribunal and she was going to appear before me, and I recused myself. At the time, because the parties felt it was uncomfortable. I, on the other hand, thought that, it's a relationship, but, she was somebody I was very close to.
Sorry, recuse is that you step back, you're unable to hear the case because of a conflict of interest?
Yeah. No, I didn't see it as a conflict of interest, but I thought there were people who were obviously concerned that we had known each other for too long and we'd worked together. But it was a very interesting thing for me to have her appear before me. It's actually been quite interesting. So it's been a very long relationship. But what comes back to your question, which I find very interesting, is in 2007, she did an interview with The Guardian. And she said, she named me as the next best thing in law. And I was stunned because I didn't believe that. I still don't believe that. And I don't know what possessed her to say that. And I've asked her several times, and she just smiles and she said, I just said it because I believed it.
I know that there's a lot that you can't talk about, and there are obviously a lot of confidential clauses in your work. Do you find that hard? Because you seem to be quite outspoken. I'm sure there's a part of you sometimes that's thinking, I need to speak up about this. Can you? Or is it more about doing the work behind the scenes? Where do you sit on that?
There are a lot of political things that I can't say because if I even like something, it will be held against me. I've learned to measure myself with what and it's frustrating because you might believe in a certain thing and you feel a bit like a coward sometimes for not speaking out. But then coming back to the example of children in detention, sometimes I feel you can do much more behind the scenes, quietly. And if your aim is to fix a problem, then you can do it more effectively if you're on that panel and not challenged.
And there's another aspect of your charity work. You sponsor boxing tournaments for disadvantaged youth here in Pakistan.
Yeah, that...
Is there anything that you don't do?
Probably watch TV. Boxing came about as a way of coping with grief for me. I always say boxing saved my life probably, and it was my way of coping, and it's a wonderful thing. And I had a coach who used to coach, and I used to moan all the time, about my life and how sad I am. And he said, "I'm going to take you to Liari one day." And I said, "Liari, you just get shot. I'm not going to Liari. No way." He said, "No, you're going with me. You'll be fine." And he said, "I want you to meet my girls." And I said, I didn't know who his girls were. But he took me to this boxing club in Liari. And look, I've grown up in Karachi. I'd never been to Liari. I mean, now I think Liari is quite a hot topic because it's in some movie. But at the time, no one went to Liari. And so I went there and I saw these young girls who were boxing. They were little, very skinny, but they were like wildcats. And they were boxing in public. And they were this crowd of men looking at them. I don't think they were leering at them. They were just interested because they were interested in boxing. So I suddenly discovered this whole group of young men and women that came from very difficult circumstances. Liari has a lot of drugs, and a lot of young boys end up going into drugs, and then they end up, in very bad company. And boxing, in a sense, saves you from that because it gives you a family, a boxing family. It means that you can join a government department and get some money if you become a bit professional. It gives you mental health. People talk all the time about physical and poverty and all these things, but mental health is a huge issue, and it helps with that. So I decided that I would sponsor a boxing tournament every year, and this is going to be very funny. I made the mistake of, in my mind, to encourage the young girls that anyone who could beat me would get like 5,000 rupees. And you can imagine I got punched senseless. I have nose broken here, sort of eye broken here, and after that I stopped doing that. But they are so good, and I realized that, never to do that in Liari.
You didn't stop because of the payout. You stopped because you were concerned for your health.
Well, yes, it's expensive to get a new nose. I haven't got one yet, but...
There are some more questions that I'm going to leave for the end, but I'd like to open the questions to the floor because I'm sure that you might have your own questions, and Mahnaz has kindly agreed to take some of your questions. So do we have any questions from the floor? See some of you. We've got one here. I think we've got a mic for you, so please go ahead.
So Mahnaz, what happened to that novel? The novel you abandoned?
Well, I think it's lying somewhere in some drawer with bits and pieces, which I'd never really look at again. I think it takes a lot of courage to write, and I think I'm a real perfectionist, so that's part of the problem. But yeah, I think we all love telling stories, and I always say, lawyers are great storytellers because that's what we do. But I don't know what's happened to the novel. I think it's a dream. Maybe an impossible dream.
So you don't think you're going to go back to it at some point?
It's an impossible dream.
Yeah.
And you've taught us that nothing is impossible. You don't want to commit. Okay. Any more questions? I see one here from the gentleman here. And then I think we've got one at the back as well. But let's go here. Yep. If you'd like to take the mic and ask your question, please.
Yeah, Mahnaz, since you're a lawyer, a barrister, and an arbitrator, and also a writer, do you think that something like 10 or 15 years down the line, you'll be able to write on the flaws of the legal system that has evolved in life right now?
Just make sure you keep the
Needs
mic.
any
Yeah.
improvement?
think you got the gist of the...
Well, God forbid I write a legal book. I mean, I've written quite a few out of absolute duress because, as a Cambridge academic, I have to kind of write some legal stuff. But I think I wouldn't write something outright as an analysis of the legal system because I've done it for so long, and the last thing I'd like to do is write. But I think your experiences always seep into your writing in some way. And, who knows? If I ever write, if I do, then there could be, something to do with the theme you're saying. I have no idea. I haven't started writing, so
have you
who knows
noticed
what
any-
monsters might come.
Have you noticed any flaws in the present system?
Here or elsewhere? Abroad. I think no legal system is perfect. Some work better than others. And I think there are challenges. So, I'll speak about England. I think we have a very good legal system. I think it's a very robust legal system. Is it perfect? I don't know. But I have a very high regard for the legal system in the UK.
Can I just, as an aside, I'll come to the questions. Is it also constantly evolving? Must it be constantly evolving?
No, it's integrity.
Okay.
It's accountability. It's making sure that, you decide without fear or favor. Very important.
Okay, I think we have one question here. Was there a question at the back as well? I saw a hand before. No, okay, we'll go here and then we'll come to you and then to you. Okay.
So what's the best advice you've ever received?
Actually, the best advice I've ever received, I had I would say the privilege of being the chair of a panel of 3 Chief Justices, okay? The Chief Justice of England and Wales, a lady called Sue Carr, the Chief Justice of Northern Ireland, and the President of the European Court of Human Rights, and so these 3 incredibly daunting, all women. In 1,000 years of English legal history, we had the first female Lord Justice, who changed it to Lady Justice because obviously she was not a Lord. And it was the most challenging hour of my life because what I wanted them to talk about was not their success and being the first, but their failures. And the best piece of advice I've ever received was from them, which was to say, do you think we've got here without not failing, without sitting and crying in the washroom saying, I have failed, it's never going to happen. And the thing I learned from them was resilience and persistence. And I think that is the best piece of advice I can give myself today, which is what I got from them this summer, and what I give anyone in the room. You've got to have that, otherwise it's pretty grim on the other side.
Now that you say that, does imposter syndrome sometimes kick in?
All the time. I have no idea what I'm doing, where I am, given where I come from. I mean, this is the other thing. I'm the first girl in my family, immediate family, to have a career. And that's been very interesting because I've always tried to look at women who have had jobs. But at the same time, I really appreciate women who raise families and who kind of run their homes. So there is some kind of pride in every work. There is contribution somewhere. And it's just that I didn't have anyone I could ask, how does it feel to be a judge? And what do you do? And all the people giving me advice were sort of men of a certain vintage who said, judicial gravitas, dear girl.
We had a question here at the front. There's a mic to your left.
Thank you. Mahnaz, you're thrillingly inspiring. And I remember when Most Star first came out, and I think I might have even written a review of it somewhere down the line, but it's so exciting and wonderful to have you here addressing us, not just about literature, but about your work as barrister and your advocacy for the poor and for the deprived people. I'm actually going to ask you a question related to writing, which is that as a lawyer, as a trained barrister, you probably have a very overdeveloped right brain, or is it left brain, the very analytical, forensic type of thinking. And writing requires the right brain more, the creativity and the sort of being able to see things as a whole in an artistic manner. Did you ever feel that the two sides were conflicting in you when you were trying to come up with a book and then a novel?
Bina, first of all, thank you so much for being here and for the kind words you've said. Of course, you're such a well-known writer yourself, so thank you. I think I've answered that question in a very implicit way. When you look at history here, I wrote that book in the early 2000s, and I've been practicing law since. And you're quite right. My transformation into who I've become. So I started off as a writer, and I wrote English as a writer. I use words, and words for me were about describing, rosings, nightingales. I mean, we grew up with all these lovely images, but they were really about using words to move people's hearts in a way. I guess my own heart. It was just writing. It was the night sky. Was I talking about the smell of something? I mean, I'm being very sort of simplistic here, and it was a bit chaotic. And when I started doing law, I realized that language had to be used in a very different way. Words mattered in a slightly different way. And the transformation started at Cambridge, but I wasn't fully mutated into the lawyer I am then. But when I started working and I started writing pleadings, I started seeing words being used as weapons. So words started being used to attack the other side. It was allegations, it was bad behavior, misconduct. It was very, very harsh, very, very negative, and I was told that I just needed to write like a barrister. And there's a particular type of way you write, it's a particular way you express yourself, and as you said, it's a particularly linear brain molded in the shape of a Victorian man. Okay? And that is what it was. There was no scope. You had to think like that, you had to dress like that, you had to be like that. You were female, but that didn't really matter. And that's when I realized that somehow a part of me had gone amiss. I couldn't really access the writer in me. And the two kind of have separated. Just to end with a very interesting thing, I once worked on a short, one of my short stories was made into a film, and it launched Rain Dance in 2000. I'm dating this for a reason because I haven't done anything creative for, over 25 years. And the French producer told me something along the lines of what you're saying, and she said, "So, you are an advocate?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "You're also a poet at heart, I see." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "And the two live together in one body and brain?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Be careful. There will be a revolution one day. The poet will rise. Make sure it's not a bloody one." I think that answers, I hope, your question.
We've got time for the last question, very, very briefly, from the gentleman here. Yes, we're going to get a microphone to you.
Hello. My name is Muhammad Ali. This is a revolutionary time in history. We are going through a revolutionary period. So you think that basic education will be not necessary in the future with AI or without AI? Most institutions like justice, schools will diminish. Do you think so?
Before you answer that question, I'm hosting and moderating a debate on AI, and that's a whole hour tomorrow. But you have 1 minute in which to answer this.
I think the world's going to change massively with AI, and I think education is going to change. I'll just leave you with one good bit that I think is amazing. There was a time that if you wanted to learn anything, you had to go to a very good university to access that kind of lecture by that person. Now you can just go to YouTube and you can learn anything from Howard to Oxford and Cambridge. And I think that's just really incredible. And that's all I'll say on that topic. I think it's great that.
One final question before we let you go. And by the way, can I just thank everybody? We don't have time for questions more. I'm just going to ask one more, and I'm going to let Mahnaz go. Do we have time to ask one more question?
I'll be very quick if it's a quick question.
Okay, we'll be very quick on this one. Yeah, we'll go to the gentleman there.
And then you can ask me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Don't want the next session to tell me off, but please go ahead.
It was a very nice listening to your experiences. As a writer, we all of the writers have some favorite writers. Can you please share the names of your favorite writers and some of their work that you love? Thank you.
I'm a big fan of poets, actually. So I love Iqbal, I love Faiz, I love Lorca, I love Neruda, I love Darwish, I love Nizar Kabani. It's poetry.
Before we finish, can I just thank KLF for the work they're doing here, for having us in this session, for bringing us together. Lots and lots of conversations are happening. It's great to see so many young volunteers in this festival. I've seen all the young volunteers going around. I think that's extremely commendable for this festival, which brings me nicely to my last question. The girl who dared to dream. If you had advice for a student today about their future, what advice would that be? And that's going to be our finishing note here today.
You know, James, I want to go for advice to the schoolgirl I was, not to who I am now, because that schoolgirl had optimism. And I think the great thing about being young is you have your whole life ahead of you and what adventures may come, and how can you not hope for the best? Because the downside is you may not get it, but if you're not going to dream, you're not going to get it anyway. At least you have a chance of getting it. So you must dream. You must strive towards it. And you have the gift of youth and years ahead and adventures to come.
And a reminder that the book Mo Star has been republished. It's available here. Mahnaz will sign copies very kindly if you so wish. But ultimately, as we've been saying, the lawyer, the judge of the World Bank, the writer, but the girl who dared to dream. Speaking at the Karachi Literature Festival, please let's hear a big round of applause for Mahnaz Malik. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the festival.
Thank you so much for the therapy session, James. I'll send the bill.
Thank you so much.